Cubans who defy Castro's control over the web. In Cuba, there's nothing worldwide about the web. Castro likes to keep a lid on internet access. His rules are among the most restrictive in the world. It's a country of 11 million, but connections are only available to a couple of 100,000 people with connections. For everyone else, getting the internet's like trying to get black market plutonium. But that doesn't stop them from trying, and there is a small but lively underground busily inventing ways to get online, as we hear from Canadian journalist Sheena Rossiter in the Cuban capital.
In a well-appointed Spanish-style villa in a nice part of Havana, a group of 20-somethings crowd around a computer that rumbles just as loud as the 1960s Chevrolets that line the city streets.
Involucra un peligro, como todo lo desconocido.
This house belongs to a wiry man in his 30s who works as a video editor for a Cuban film director. I'm calling him Yorin because he doesn't want me to use his real name. His neighbors have come over to use his internet connection.
The internet in Cuba is, well, I think it's like a hard-to-get treat.
Yorin's hired a man to hook up a new connection after the old one stopped working. After a few flicks of the keys and a couple left clicks of the mouse, the internet is up and running. It's illegal to have the internet at home here. If the Cuban government catches Yorin with his connection, he could spend up to 5 years in jail.
Now I have to buy it illegally, which is like buying plutonium. Right now I'm sharing it because I don't want to pay for that just on myself, because it's like depressing.
Yorin's house is like an internet portal for the neighborhood. Today, people have come over to get the latest off the web and copy it to their own USB keys. It's like another version of Radio Bemba, the Cuban slang for word of mouth. It's the way a lot of information gets around here, where journalism is state-run and dissent is discouraged. Word of mouth is also how Yorin got his dial-up connection. One of his friends is paying a foreigner who lives in Cuba to borrow his internet rights. But after a few minutes of surfing, the system crashes when he goes on a site loaded with photos. An all-too-familiar incident.
Because it's like very primitive stuff. So you had very big bandwidth, and internet is based on that speed. And in here you can spend like 1 hour to one picture to download. And there's some service that they cannot download because they have to check so many stuff from security and whatever. They just lost in the process.
For people who don't have access like Yorin, the internet can be even more primitive. I saw lineups stretching for hours at an internet cafe outside Havana. People who manage to get online can only send and receive emails through the government email service. They can't surf the web. And in Cuba, publishing anything onto the web can be downright infuriating. On the back patio of a crowded bar in Havana Vieja, Cuba's best-known blogger sits down at a table with her husband and a couple of friends. Yoani Sanchez is relaxed as she takes off her oversized sunglasses and lets her waist-length hair hang down over the back of the chair.
I have a lot of personal stories, questions that I couldn't keep back anymore. More than anything, lots of frustration. That's what's magnificent about a blog. It's like a virtual vomit after 33 years of indigestion.
Yoani is a petite 34-year-old, a computer scientist in her day job, and a dissident. Her blog's called Generation Y, named after the huge generation of Cubans born in the 70s and 80s who were given names beginning with Y, like Yorin, Yanis, and Yusimi. Yoani's agreed to meet me here at this cafe for an interview, since I've heard from many people that her house is under surveillance, and it wouldn't be safe for foreigners, especially journalists, to go there. Her blog has made her a target here, but it's also turned her into a bit of an international sensation. Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people of 2008. Her blog is read around the world and translated into 17 languages, including English, by a group of volunteers. But even getting the Spanish version on the web is a complicated process.
I
write my posts offline. I copy them to a USB key, or I go to a public space with my laptop and I send them all at once. People outside of Cuba have the impression I'm online all the time, but it's not like that. I use the internet only once or twice a week, and only for a few minutes at a time. I send my posts via email, and friends outside Cuba publish them for me.
And publishing her anti-government messages carries huge risks. It could mean life in jail. But because Ioanni's views are posted online offshore, the government can't control it, and she can't, strictly speaking, be arrested for it.
I'm always scared, but when I was little and I was scared of something, I didn't just run away or panic. I ran towards it. And I do the same thing with my blog. I run to the place that creates the most fear.
And Ioanni has had to face her fears. Recently, sometime after we'd met, she claims she was on her way to an anti-violence demonstration when 3 casually dressed government officials forced her into a car and beat her. She says she thought they were going to kill her. When we spoke, she vowed to keep blogging no matter what the risk.
Look, the problem is that you come from a society where you know that what you think, your opinions, and what you see out there, you will never be able to talk about. Not for a minute on television, the radio, or a few lines in a newspaper. So the only option you have is the internet. In the case of bloggers in Cuba, the internet hasn't been a choice. It's been a necessity. It's the only option. It's difficult, but it's an option.
Our meeting is brief. It's time for Ioanni to go and meet her fellow bloggers, as she does every week. We leave at separate times in separate cars before meeting at an apartment. The sign on the door reads, Internet para todos, Internet for everyone. More than 20 bloggers are here, most of them young adults. Today they're trading USB keys and burned CDs, loaded with information found on websites, or email attachments sent to them from friends abroad. Ioanni's husband, Reynaldo Escobar, is talking about a plan to try and create a Cuban version of the Huffington Post, where all bloggers can publish. But another blogger says that'll take so much work. After all, they don't have the machines, the connections, or the facilities to do that. These bloggers talk passionately for hours about how to get their message out. By the time I have to leave, 2 bloggers who are here for the first time have started an argument with the rest of the group, saying the government really needs to be overthrown. But in Cuba, not all bloggers are counter-revolutionaries, or even political.
Politics is in everything that we do. If you read in a blog or the paper or in a journal, it's always about politics. But where we're headed to now is that the Cuban blogging scene has to get diversified for the better.
In a Havana suburb, 28-year-old Yasmin Portales sits at her kitchen table in the uncomfortable heat. She's a blogger who says she blogs with Cuba rather than for or against it. She writes about things other than politics, her family and the Cuban art scene. And she wants people outside the country to know that not all Cubans feel the same about Cuba as Ioanni Sanchez does.
To me, Ioanni and other Cuban blogs that come from this part of the blogosphere are very political, and they get a lot of attention from foreigners outside the country. But they are like ghosts. Foreigners think that they are popular in the country, but people in the country can't even see what they're writing. One person can't be representative of the Cuban blogger scene. It can't be that one person and her opinions Cubans represent the country in other parts of the world. This is the biggest obstacle for us.
8.5 months pregnant, she takes a deep breath and walks across the room to show me her computer. A computer that was years in the making.
My husband and I had been saving for about 3 years and finally bought it. At the time, it was not legal to buy the computer in the store, but they didn't have legislation against buying computer parts here and there and then putting it together in your house.
So Yasmin and her husband bought all the parts and built their own computer. Now the law's changed, and Cubans can buy entire computers, as long as they have a government-issued permit, for about $770 US. That's almost 40 times the salary of the average Cuban. Back in Havana, Yurin Garcia and his neighbors are watching a rough cut of a video he edited on a legal software that took 3 days to download. He tells me he's frustrated knowing people in other parts of the world have so much more access to technology.
We don't know how to use internet. There's so many people that they don't even know what it is. It's a very sad reality because we are already behind it in a world that's already went on that like a decade ago. That's gonna cost us economically, socially, a lot of stuff. That's like a handicap.
And he doesn't really expect the government to help him overcome that handicap. The risk of loosening up the internet rules are too high.
It will be relatively short. The system is going to start cracking after that because people are going to start to associating, realizing that my needs, my problems is the problems and the needs of everybody. All media are totally and fully controlled because they are controllable. But internet is totally out of control.
But as long as the government has some level of control, young Cubans like Yurin will continue to find ways to bend the rules and seep through the small cracks in the Cuban system so they can get online. For Dispatches, I'm Sheena Rossiter in Havana, Cuba.
A story of immovable objects and irresistible forces there.